My name is Jenny Ray, and on behalf of Jenny Ray & Associates, in partnership with Western Kentucky University, I invite you to think about ways in which you might empower teachers to grow in their effectiveness, such that it impacts student learning experiences and performance in positive ways. Take a moment to read our guiding question. There are some key words for deep consideration. First, what does it mean to empower teachers to grow? How will you know what teacher effectiveness looks like? And finally, how might you study the impact that teacher effectiveness has on student learning experiences and performance? Our learning pathway includes defining effective evidence collection and then calibration using videos to align to the framework. We will also discover how you can use feedback to feed forward. So once you practice collecting evidence and aligning that evidence to an effectiveness rubric, then you will learn how to empower teachers to grow through effective communication skills. Lastly, we will put together the skills you've learned in order to plan for meaningful and productive professional growth conversations. So let's get started with effective evidence collection. Evidence collection during teacher observations is an important aspect of promoting fairness and accuracy in the evaluation of teachers. And to ensure that evidence collection is objective, it is important to establish clear criteria and expectations, to use multiple sources of evidence, to use objective measures and non-evaluative or opinionated language, and to monitor for bias. By following these guidelines, according to the research from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, schools can promote fairness and accuracy in the evaluation of teachers and provide valuable feedback to support professional growth and development. Collecting evidence and communication afterwards has the potential to either motivate or demoralize teachers in your building, and you will know the skills to practice to ensure that you are motivating and empowering teachers to become their best versions of themselves. Let's start with establishing clear criteria and expectations. Before conducting observations, establish clear criteria and expectations for what good teaching looks like. This will help to ensure that observations are based on objective standards rather than personal biases. In Kentucky, as well as many other states, a framework built upon the research of Charlotte Danielson is the guidance document for establishing clear expectations for all teachers. Let's consider one of the components in the classroom environment domain. So let's look at 2B, establishing a culture for learning. What does it mean to establish a culture for learning? Well, to begin, let's consider the language with the accomplished performance category. The first bullet states that classroom culture is a cognitively busy place where the learning is valued by all, with high expectations for learning being the norm for most students. Well, how might you know that your teachers and you share a common understanding of what a cognitively busy place is? How do you know if you agree upon what it looks like when learning is valued by all, with high expectations for learning being the norm? Perhaps the classroom walls and displays showcase student work that reflects deep understanding, critical thinking, and creative application of knowledge. Or maybe students' projects and essays and problem-solving activities are prominently displayed, celebrating their intellectual achievements. Notice also that one of the critical attributes is that the teacher conveys an expectation of high levels of student effort. Perhaps there is evidence of the teacher providing challenging assignments that require students to stretch their abilities and to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. Additionally, maybe you could talk about the kinds of evidence that might support that students understand that taking on challenging tasks is an integral part of the learning process and is supported by appropriate scaffolding. There is so much rich language within the framework that even in this one component, as with every single component in the framework, it presents opportunities to spark lively discussion with your teachers about what this looks like and what kinds of evidence might support teacher effectiveness in each component. So once the criteria and expectations are established, then determining multiple sources of evidence to inform this effectiveness is critical to our goal of empowering teachers to grow. It is important to consider your district's certified evaluation plan to determine the sources of evidence that are appropriate and possibly expected in order to make decisions about support to your teachers. Observation data, student feedback, teacher reflections, student work, and perhaps information and evidence from professional learning communities might be relevant information to consider. In the Danielson Framework for Teaching, Component 2B is establishing a culture for learning, which involves creating an environment that fosters learning and encourages active participation and engagement from all students. So here are some examples of evidence or data that could align with this component. A classroom observer could look for evidence of a positive and inclusive classroom culture, such as whether the teacher promotes a sense of community and mutual respect among students. The observer could also look for evidence of engagement and active participation among all students and not just a few. Student feedback could be collected through surveys or interviews to determine if they feel safe, supported, and encouraged to participate and learn in the classroom. Students may also provide feedback on the extent to which the teacher encourages a culture of learning by promoting curiosity, inquiry, and critical thinking. Teachers might reflect on their instructional practices and identify ways in which they foster a culture of learning. This could include reviewing lesson plans, assignments, and assessments, as well as reflecting on their interactions with students to identify areas for improvement. Student work should never be overlooked because it can provide evidence of whether students are engaged and actively participating in their learning. Examples of student work that demonstrates critical thinking, creativity, and inquiry may provide evidence of the teacher's pathway to success of establishing a culture of learning in the classroom. The physical environment of the classroom itself can also provide evidence of a culture of learning. A classroom that is organized, clean, and inviting may indicate that the teacher values learning and takes pride in creating a positive learning environment. The classroom and learning environment may also include displays of student work, books, and resources that support learning. So, once teachers and administrators have a shared understanding of the criteria and the expectations for effective teaching, and once multiple sources of evidence have been agreed upon, it is important to gather factual evidence that is free from opinionated or evaluative language. So, let's consider what it means to collect evidence using objective measures. Using scripting, tally marks, timestamps, and room arrangement notes when collecting evidence of effective teaching can provide numerous benefits for educators, administrators, and researchers. These methods help ensure accurate, comprehensive, and meaningful data collection during classroom observations. Scripting involves recording verbatim what the teacher and students say during a lesson. It also allows for qualitative analysis of the language used by both teachers and students, providing insights into communication patterns, discourse, and the overall classroom atmosphere. Tally marks are a simple and efficient way to track occurrences of specific behaviors or events, such as student participation or instances of specific instructional strategies. Tally marks provide quantitative data that can be easily analyzed to identify trends and patterns. Timestamps help educators analyze the pacing and distribution of instructional activities, transitions, and student engagement over the course of a lesson. Likewise, recording room arrangement notes helps document the physical layout of the classroom, which can impact student interactions, visibility, and overall engagement. These notes might help to reveal how the physical setup supports or hinders instructional goals, helping teachers to make informed decisions about seating, resources, and materials placement. So collectively, these methods help to provide a comprehensive and well-rounded approach to evidence collection in the context of effective teaching. And even more important, concentrating on using objective measures helps to ensure that you do not jump to conclusions and write opinionated language. Too often, though, opinionated language creeps in. So instead of just collecting evidence, notes can begin to provide personal opinions, likes and dislikes, which may or may not align with the established criteria for teacher effectiveness. When you say or write something like, "the lesson flowed well," then the teacher could be left thinking, well, I wonder what that means. How did my principal come to that conclusion so that I know what to do next time? The criteria or the framework itself provides the evaluative language. All you have to do as the administrator is to collect the evidence and then collaboratively determine with the teacher how that evidence aligns to the language of the framework to determine the level of effectiveness. If notes included students were not engaged, well, that may or may not be true. It's certainly one person's opinion, but what was the evidence that led to that conclusion? In other words, instead of writing that, you want to write down what did you see or hear students doing or saying? How was time utilized during the lesson? I like how you use stations for this lesson. That is not evidence. It's a compliment, but compliments do not empower teachers. They build rapport, yes, and can establish some levels of trust. So you must provide authentic compliments when appropriate, but disguised as evidence during a classroom observation, it's not appropriate. It's not evidence. The room is not well organized. Again, it's not evidence, it is an opinion. Think about what led you to state that opinion. Transitions took way too long is also not evidence. And during classroom observations, it's imperative that you capture evidence in order to move teachers forward and to allow for growth experiences. So how might these opinionated examples be transformed? Well, the first one might be mitigated by using a time-stamped evidence of the key lesson components. That's one example. For the second, detailed information about what students were doing and the time frame in which they were doing it might be helpful information. When the focus is on empowering teachers to own their own learning, you might consider asking a question that aligns with the compliment you were about to give. What did the teacher notice? Or how did you plan for student engagement when you designed the stations? Might be a couple of questions you could ask. Verbatim scripting of questions and tally marks for similar levels of questions might be a useful tool for teachers who do not yet realize that they utilize one level of questioning. And timestamps of students during lesson transitions might be useful information as well, with a question about what the teacher notices about the time that it took during transitions. When you replace opinionated language with clear evidence and authentic curiosity about what the teacher notices, you are cultivating a reflective practitioner instead of someone who relies on you to provide all of the information and the evaluation about their effectiveness. All right, so let's do a quick pulse check for you to determine which of the statements reflect evidence or opinion. The first one, 25 of 30 students completed the task within the time allotted. So that's just evidence. The second one says the lesson was not rigorous enough for most students. Okay, so that's opinion. So you have to, write down what were the parts of the lesson, like what led you to that conclusion. What did you see? What did you hear? And the third one, there was no formative assessment at the close of the lesson. That's just evidence. You didn't say it was good or bad. You were just stating the fact there was no formal assessment or formative assessment at the close of the lesson. So that is evidence. Now, complete the card sort activity before beginning the next video, where we will continue with effective evidence collection that includes monitoring for bias.